Hey guys, now we're playing Death Trips. I don't know what to expect from this glitch. Is that you making that noise?
What noise?
You don't hear that?
Oh, what is that?
I thought that was you.
I thought that was you. What you got us playing?
I don't know. I'm scared.
Child, if you guys don't see us upload anything in the next 2 weeks, this is why.
Okay, let's go. October 31st, 2008, Inspector M. James is in a hunt for a serial killer called Lady Death. The last victim of this dreadful criminal was found in this cheap hotel where Lady James is currently investigating. Unfortunately for the inspector, the murderer is still there.
Mm.
I'm scared.
Oh. Child, that door looks a little
Fucked up.
Mm-mm.
No, there's an outside.
Okay. Oh. Mm-mm. Oh. Wow.
Oh my God.
Oh.
No, please. No.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bust out like. Uh, okay. Thanks for playing. Yep, that was it. Death. Oh my. Okay, now the title makes it Death Trips.
That bitch didn't fail.
Child.
And we were sitting there like, no, please. And then the bitch done tripped and fell and died.
Oh. Mm-mm.
Hi, guys.
Hey, hey.
Today, me and Glitch are watching some scary stories. Ooh, so scary for the Halloween season.
Yes. I love Halloween.
When I noticed the ads for a secretary, I took it. It was quite a normal advertisement. An elderly woman required a secretary to answer on many kinds of tasks, sounding simple, which at that point I took my life for all that simpler. Mrs. Thorne, the elderly lady, replied promptly to my application and asked me to come over to her place for my first day at work. Her address led me to an old sprawling house on the outskirts of town. It had a creepy charm to it, but I declined paying heed to the uneasy feelings creeping up my spine. This was my chance to put my life back on track. When Mrs. Thorne opened the door, she warmly invited me in. She was frail and sharp-eyed, seeming to see right through me.
Would you like some tea before we begin?
She asked, her voice as creaky as the floorboards under my feet. And to make a good impression, I agreed. I remembered the bitter taste of the tea. It was warm yet cold simultaneously. As I continued drinking, my sight became blurry, my body limp, and this is what I remember last: Mrs. Thorne's wicked smile. There was no dawn, yet my eyes snapped open to find myself lying in a musty, dimly lit basement where chains bit deep into my wrists. The air inside was icy, damp, without a sound other than the drip of water far away echoing from some other room. Panic overwhelmed me as I strained against the chains, which did not budge an inch. Mrs. Thorne stepped into view at the top of the stairs as she slowly descended them in eerily tranquil movement.
Welcome back, dear.
She said, her voice chillingly serene.
What's all this? Why am I... You have a task to complete.
She handed me a set of tools and some wooden boards.
Build your coffin.
She commanded.
Oh,
My eyes snapped open in horror. I shrieked for help.
Are you insane? Let me go, right now!
But Mrs. Thorne only laughed.
See that on your leg?
Then pointed to my ankle. An odd device. A bangle-like thing was attached to my right ankle. I watched Mrs. Thorne taking out a small remote, then pressing a red button on it. Electricity surged through my body. I convulsed and barely could keep myself from crying out.
Now, are you going to do as I say?
She asked, her eyes glinting with malevolent glee. I nodded, shuddering in agony. I began hammering the coffin together as my brain twisted and contorted for an escape. As Mrs. Thorne spoke sick fantasies to me while laboring, I found out she wanted to have buried a person alive, and then all her life listened to the screams. Her voice dripped with sadistic pleasure, and I knew I wasn't her first victim, but I vowed to be the last. Mrs. Thorne didn't know anything about my dark past. I had worked for a secret hitman agency in Mexico. Wanting to start fresh brought me back to the States. My stealth and combat skills were, however, on par with the point at which the agency was paying. I meant to use them as my ticket through this nightmare. As I knelt to set the coffin upright, loosening the gear on my ankle with the screwdriver dangling from my hip was merely an automatic act. Every motion was swift and controlled, the byproduct of the years of discipline. Mrs. Thorne remained oblivious.
so you over there twerking on this device? Get it off. Okay. Who did this story? They needed to be shocked just for doing this story. But okay, we're gonna continue. Like, look, what this?
It just didn't look right. It didn't look right.
No, it didn't.
And they tried to just like make it seem like it was a normal thing. Like it was just an automatic act as I was loosening this up from my ankle. I'm like, you look like you're doing a strip tease.
However, on par with the point at which the agency was paying. I meant to use them as my ticket through this nightmare. As I knelt to set the coffin upright, loosening the gear on my ankle with the screwdriver dangling from my hip was merely an automatic act. Every motion was swift and controlled, the byproduct of the years of discipline. Mrs. Thorne remained oblivious to my intentions as she basked in her sadistic fantasy. Finally, I released the anklet. With a jerky motion, I flung myself at Mrs. Thorne, knocking her down to the floor. Although thin and fragile, she seemed to exert untold strength, and struggling, my greater strength in the end won. I strapped the device to her wrist and grasped the remote.
Now, you shall obey me.
I hissed through icy arrogance. From then onwards, tables turned. Mrs. Thorne became afraid and was bound to follow my orders. For the next 3 days, I forced her to write a will, where she left all her properties to me. Next 3 months straight, I played the good secretary. The neighbors got used to my kind disposition toward the elderly Mrs. Thorne. I ensured that everyone had my side as the dutiful caretaker of that old granny. These 3 months, Mrs. Thorne laid like a broccoli around the house. And then one fine day, I put Mrs. Thorne into a wheelchair and placed her above the stairs. She knew the end and begged for her life. With a cold, emotionless expression, I hit the button on the remote. Mrs. Thorne convulsed in anguish as her convulsive movements rolled the wheelchair over. She fell down the stairs, her neck snapping with a grotesque crack. The death was ruled an accident. That was when the lawyer finally called me and told me that Mrs. Thorne had willed everything to me. I pretended to cry and told him how sorry I was and that she was close to me. I demanded some kind of memorial and funeral should be done to pay respects to the dead owner. During the funeral, I made Mrs. Thorne lie in that coffin which I had built under compulsion. As the coffin was lowered into the grave, I sat there and looked at it. My face was unreadable since I had survived and had ensured the future generations would not have to pass through what I did. But for sure, the darkness of my past and what I went through will forever be seen as marks against my soul.
Oh my God.
Child,
That took a turn.
that was some BS.
You really did not like how she unlocked us.
Look, I'm just saying, like, oh, you answer the ad. You went for this job. You ended up getting buzzed, and then you so happened to be this ex-assassin that was, or an assassin assistant, or whatever they want to call it. So, and they taught you how to twerk while trying to get devices off of you and everything. Like, okay. You could have did a lot more stuff than that. I'm just saying, if they really taught you some stuff, you. But the talent that you took from there was, let me twerk on it like it's a piece of sausage, and get, free myself. Like, mm.
I mean, it got her out of there.
Do what you got to do. I say that she wasn't an ex-assassin assistant. I'm saying she worked down there at the Pimp Club on Amazing Tuesday nights, and she thought that it was cute to pay for college or whatever, but in her mind, while she was doing her little tricks and everything, she was playing assassin, and that's what she was delusional. That's all it was. Oh, child. Working on it. And she ain't had nothing. So what's like? What, you just grinding hip bones? Like, mm.
Well, at least she got out of there with whatever hip bone she had.
Look, the moral of the story: when it went in a tight spot, twerk.